Okay, in this scenario, what we're going to go through is looking at a little bit extended from the address, right? So I already have the address fields corrected in here in my customer list. Now I'm going to focus on something else that's very common in an outside system. So one is that the customer number is frequently, or the account number or something like that, is frequently the field that is the unique identifier. Right? In QuickBooks, we've talked about already how the unique identifier when we're dealing with a customer is the customer name, right? It has to be unique. I can't create another customer called customer 2. QuickBooks won't allow me to do that, okay? So in a lot of outside systems, this customer number is the unique field, but they can have the same name, all right? So you have to be aware of that. The other thing that we'll see a lot of times when we're dealing with outside systems is we'll see that they have lists separated and they use codes. So in QuickBooks, again, behind the scenes, this customer has a list ID, right? We don't see it here, but if we looked at it behind the scenes, we would be able to see that list ID number. And so it's kind of similar in some of these outside systems. So on the customer card itself, it, instead of terms saying like net 30, it tells us the term code, which is 505, or the sales rep code, which is 1225. But then we have to cross-reference that somehow to other lists, right? We need to know, what does 1225 mean? Who are they talking about when they're talking about that as a sales rep? So we want to be able to cross-reference that. So generally what has to happen, again, we want to look for those inconsistencies, right? I don't know what 505 is, and see if we can fill in or find in their database the list. So here I have my sales rep list, what the sales rep code is, and then what their first and last name is. Then I also have my terms and what each of those terms mean, what the term name is here, okay? Now on some of them, again, we have to be aware. If there's only 5, find and replace could work. You might want to consider find and replace if you've checked out scenario 1, but we're going to be talking about Vlookup here. Now in this example, now this is not very common when it comes to enterprise customers, but it's possible. So in this example, we're actually not dealing with B2B, right? Business to business. We're dealing with business to consumer. So that we don't have any company names on our list. We're only dealing with first and last names. So that's our customer here. So particularly when you're dealing with just first and last names, the concern is there that most likely there are going to be duplicates, right? Somewhere there's going to be a Joe Smith and then there's going to be another Joe Smith. So of course, in QuickBooks, because you have to have the name be unique, right? What you show on this list be unique, we don't want to import in the customer number, because the customer number is unique right here. The customer number may be unique, but we don't want to put the customer number as a customer name here, because this name really functions for a lot of things in QuickBooks, right? So first of all, on this list, if I start typing, if I want to go to Hotshot, it'll take me to Hotshot here. So that customer name is really important because that's what shows up here. It's also, when we create a new transaction, like a new invoice as an example, it pulls from that customer name field here. It doesn't pull from the company name field. Okay, so that field's really important. So we want it to be, have some consistency in there. So again, the first thing that I want to do is I want to find out if there are duplicates. Okay, because again, on this sheet, there's only 55 customers. The odds of having duplicate names is pretty low, but of course this is one of our scenarios, so I definitely threw in some duplicate names in there. So what do we want to do anytime we're dealing with data? We always want to make sure that our originals are kept. So before we start doing any kind of manipulating of data in Excel, we want to make a copy. So we're going to go ahead and create a copy of this customer original and call it customer import. Then I'm going to go ahead and insert a column in here. Now in my new file, I want to have it displayed as last name, comma, first. That's what I want my display as name to be. So in this column here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate. I'm going to go ahead and choose the function, choose concatenate, And again, I like to use the actual function here. I don't like to just type in when I'm using concatenate. So I'm going to say I want my last name, and I want to open quotes, comma, space, close quotes, and then and then in text 3, I want my first name. Okay. So now I have Mayfield, comma, Brenda, and I can copy that down. Now again, I want to get rid of the function and just leave the data in here. So I'm going to actually copy this column and do paste special and paste my values. Okay. All right. Now I also like to try to give headers all the time because it's really helpful to help me keep track of where I'm going. So I'm going to call this last first. Now I'm going to check to see if there are any duplicates. So the way to do this is I'm going to take the entire sheet. Okay, you want to make sure to copy the entire sheet because if you sort just one column, it's going to throw all your other rows out of whack. So I select the entire sheet. I'm going to go to data and say sort. You want to make sure that, again, my data has headers up here. You want to make sure that box is checked. And I want to sort by last first. Okay, so again, it kind of puts them into different columns. Now I can spot check, right? I see Brown Angela, but when you're dealing with, again, 10,000 customers, you're not going to be able to spot check that. You don't want to. So how do we do this quickly? So I'm going to go ahead and insert an additional column in here, and we're going to use an if-then function. So I usually don't start in the first cell here. I start in the second one because I don't really care if, this is my header. I don't care about that. So I'm going to use an if-then function. So I say equals if, open parentheses. So it's saying if this cell, and I always start with the cell to the bottom. I don't want to start with the cell to the top because I want it to point out to me like the cell right next to me is the problem, right? I don't want it to start with if B2 equals B3, then show X's, because then it's going to say X is, down below here. So I always start with the one just to the left. So if B2 equals, if B3 equals B2, so if this equals that, you put a comma, then, and the comma is the then, I want to return 3 X's. So because I want to return 3 X's, I have to put them in quotes. And then I put a comma for if not, and you can see it's kind of going along with me here, right? So if, what's the test? B3 equals B2. What do I want it to do if it's true? What do I want to do if it's false? So if it's false, I want it to just be left blank. Then I close the quotes to finish my function, hit enter. So obviously this does not equal that, right? Linda Sue does not equal Bernard. So that's fine. I want to go ahead and copy this down. Okay. And in this exercise, all I'm trying to do is see if there are any duplicates. I'm not trying to pull the duplicates or anything like that. I'm just trying to see if there are duplicates, because if there aren't, I don't have to go through the next step. Okay. But I can see here, I've got Angela as a duplicate. I've got Martin or Arturo and Brenda, and I've Richard. And yeah, okay, so I have quite a few duplicates in here. So this is a problem. So the one thing that I also want to look at is, we might have duplicate names. They have different account numbers though. So they were set up as separate customers in their old system. So generally what I like to do with customers is I like to, again, take a handful of these, spot check it, and see if it's correct. Were they really supposed to be 2 separate customers, or was that an error in your system? Okay. In the case of first name and last name, usually it's not an error. In the case of a duplicate company name, sometimes it can be an error. But you can see here I have completely different, I have same name, completely different phone numbers, different addresses, and different, terms. So they really should be different customers. So the best way that we found, so now that we know that they're different, there are duplicate customers, we know we cannot import this into QuickBooks because QuickBooks will basically import Angela Brown, this one, and the details, and then go to the next line and overwrite this Angela Brown with these details. So only one of them will be put in our system. And we don't want that. We need both. So because the unique identifier that was used previously was this customer number, I'm going to stick the customer number in the field with the name, with the list name. Okay, so I'm going to add in, now that I'm done with this column, I can go ahead and delete it, right? I know they're duplicates, there's nothing else I'm going to do there. So I'm going to go ahead and add in here. Now, I guess you could just add in the customer number for the duplicates, right? And so therefore I would want to keep that column. But for now, I'm just going to add in, I'm going to pretend like there's a lot of duplicates, and I'm just going to add the customer number into the name. Okay, so I'm going to insert a column, and I'm going to use concatenate again. Concatenate's one of those. Concatenate and Vlookup are the two that we use the most when we're dealing with any kind of conversions. So I'm going to say first I want this column, this cell, so I want last name, comma, first. Again, you want to start with the last name and the first name because otherwise you're going to have to remember the customer number first when you're typing, right? 952-6000 space Abercrombie Bernard. That's not what we really want to do. When we're typing on an invoice, we want to start typing Abercrombie Bernard. Okay. Now there are some new features in QuickBooks coming out where you can type, right? I could type Bernard even and it'll still pull it up for me. But in the way that QuickBooks used to be used, you had to start typing with whatever the name started with. All right. So text 2 or text 1 is going to be C2, last name first. Text 2, I just want to put a space between. I don't want to put a dash. You want to be aware here, right? You don't want to have too many characters because, again, that field, that customer name field is limited to 41 characters. So you just want to have some awareness. You don't want to put like space dash space type of thing unless the names are pretty small. And then we have text 3 is going to be the customer number. And then I hit enter for OK. So you can see it adds them together. Now I have a nice pretty name with the customer number at the end. And I can go ahead and double click it down. I want to make sure it copies all the way down for me. It's there. So then I want to copy this column, paste special, paste my values. OK. And now this is the customer name. Okay, now I still want to leave in here the first name, last name as an example because I still want to fill in the first and last name, right? Those are still fields that I can fill in, so I still want to leave those in here. But this is the field when I'm pasting in to my customer name field. This column is what I'm going to use. Okay, so now the last first is not something that I'm going to use anymore, right? There's not any place where I really think about in my cells where I want the last first to show up anymore since I already have it in the customer name set up here. So what I want to think about is what fields will I need, the first and last name in the same cell, bill to line 2 or bill to line 1, right? Because if you think about when you're addressing somebody on an address box, it's their first name, space, last name, that goes into the bill to line 1. So I'm going to use this field and rename it first, last now. And I'm going to use concatenate again. So concatenate. And this time I'm going to put first name first, tab, open quote, space, close quote, tab, and put in the last name. So it's going to be first, space, last. Okay. So it fills it in there. I copy it down. I can Control C to copy this column, paste special, values. Okay. Now again, you want to keep scrolling down to check it when you're doing it yourself. I just don't want to do that all the time here. Okay. Now going across, again, you look at the details you have and where you can possibly fill the information into QuickBooks, because the more information you're able to put in, the better you can report on things, etc. So customer number, we know that's going to be the account number. We have our customer name, our first name and last name, which is going to be our bill to line 1. So I can actually change that to bill to 1 instead of first, last. First name, last name, we have fields for that. Phone number, we're good. Terms. Okay, so we get over here to their terms in our sales reps list, and this is where we have some issues, okay, because again, it's using 505, 203, 201. We don't really know what those are, right? We want it to be something that in QuickBooks, you can come in here and set up your terms list to say 503, 201, etc., but probably it's smarter to use it the way QuickBooks uses it with net 15, net 30, okay? In the other systems, probably when you put it on the invoice, you chose net 30, but behind the scenes, it knows that net 30 is 201 or whatever, right? So Basically, we want to get it into a format that QuickBooks functions with better, which is going to be the name, net 30, net 15. So we're going to be using Vlookup. Okay, so first thing I want to do when I do any Vlookup is I insert a column. Okay, anytime we're adding any functionality, we want to insert a column. We can't override this column. And I actually already made a mistake. With Vlookup, you need to insert a column after. Okay, so it has to be after the data. Also, when you're, and there's a lot of troubleshooting with some of this stuff sometimes. Also, when you're looking at the actual terms list here, the term that we're cross-referencing, right, or the code we're cross-referencing has to be to the left of the data that we want to return, right? So 505 is going to tie, let me move my import over here. 505 is going to tie to 505, and we want it to return due on receipt. Okay, so it needs to be to the right of the ones that we're cross-referencing. Okay. All right, so with the customer here, with the import here, I'm going to go ahead and say equals and do a function and choose Vlookup. Right, usually it defaults to most recently used. You can switch it over to all functions here and then scroll down to find Vlookup because I use this all the time, right? It shows up towards the top of my list, but it may not be at the top of your list the first time you go in there. So I'm going to go ahead and say Vlookup. Now when we're dealing with Vlookup, the first thing you want to say, the lookup value. So the lookup value is going to be the value from the original sheet. And you just copy the entire column. Okay, so the entire column. Then we're looking at the table array. So what columns, there should be several, are we going to cross-reference against? Now when you're choosing your table array, the first column that you choose should be what you're cross-referencing against. So when I'm cross-referencing terms, I'm going to click on my term sheet. My first column I choose will be that term code, but I'm also cross-referencing over to term name, right? So I highlight both of those columns. Okay. The third line here is saying, okay, you highlighted two columns. Which of the two columns do you want to return data for? And I'm going to say column 2, right? Because again, when I look at that term org, column 1 was what I'm cross-referencing. Column 2 was the actual data that I want to return, the actual name for the term. Then in range lookup, we want to say, if it's true, or if, do we want to find an exact amount? You want to put in there a 0 always. So the last one should always be a 0. And then say OK. So what does it do here? It says 505 equals 505. Let's return due upon receipt. So if I copy this down, okay, 505 down here, due upon receipt, 505 down here, due upon receipt, right? 201 equals net 15. Again, it pre-fills it in for me, so I have all my terms here. So then what I want to do is I want to copy this, paste special, paste my values, and then I can get rid of this original terms and rename my column here to be terms, because now it's in a format that QuickBooks likes, right? Or the way that we're going to be using it in QuickBooks going forward. So I'm going to go through the same thing with sales rep here. Now sales rep, when I'm looking at it, right, I have the sales rep original data here, but the sales rep original data has the first name, last name. And when we were going through and putting stuff into QuickBooks, remember there was kind of a funky format when it came to getting the information for sales reps into QuickBooks. It was first name, last name, colon, the number 3 if they're employees, colon, and then their initials. So the first thing that I want to do before I'm doing cross-referencing is I want to get it into that format, right? So that it's in a QuickBooks ready format. Now if I'm doing paste from Excel, right, all I needed in paste from Excel were the initials. But if I don't have the sales rep set up ahead of time, it won't put those sales reps in for me. In this scenario, I'm going to be importing using an IIF file. Okay, and so I want to have it in that same format that we saw on the IIF file. All right, so what do I do first? I don't want to do anything with the original, so I want to create a copy. So I'm going to create a copy of the sales rep. Move the original over to my left side over here so I'm not focused on it. And then I'm going to rename this as import. So sales rep for importing. Okay. Then we're going to use concatenate to get it into the different formats. So, I'll call this column QB format. All right. So we talked about that there were 3 things that we need. We need first, last name, which we have here. We need the number 3, because they're all going to be employees, right? That was something we asked ahead of time. And then we need the initials. So that's the part we don't have here. Now, again, there's 9 on here. If we needed the initials, if we need the initials, we can just, type them in real quick, right? So you can do that. But of course, I want to show you a way to do it in mass in case you have a ton. Okay. So the way to do it in mass is we're going to use something called left. Okay. So what that left function does is it returns all characters from the left side going to the right, and you say how many characters. So basically I'm going to say equals left. And I'm going to say I want to return the characters from this cell here, Ryan, and I just want to return the first character. So it just returns the R for me. Now if I made it return 2 characters, it's going to return the RY, right? So I just want it to return the first one for the R. I'm going to copy that down, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now because these cells are right next to each other, I can actually just grab this little box and drag it to the right. So when I do that, it just says, okay, you're doing B2. Over here, you want to do C2, right? The next cell to the right. So I can copy it to the right and copy down. Okay. Now that I have those, I'm going to go ahead and copy and do paste special and values. And then we're going to do a quick concatenate. Okay. And I'm going to concatenate the initial here. I'm not going to put any spaces in because I just want it to be RW. I don't want it to be R space W. So I say E2 and F2. Okay. There are my initials. Copy, paste special, values. Oops. What did I do wrong there? Copy, paste special, values. Okay. Then I can get rid of these. Get rid of these, and oops, did it not? Okay, let me try that again. Copy, paste special values. Okay, get rid of these, and then just put in their initials. Okay, so now I have the initials, and I have the first name, last name. It's always going to be 3 because that is they're all employees. So then I'm going to use concatenate again here to get it into the QB format. So concatenate. First, I want to have Ryan, right? First name here, open quotes, space, close quotes. So I put a space, and then I put last tab, put last name Worth, right, in text 3. After that, I want to have a colon, 3, colon again, right, because that was the format that we saw on the IIF file. And then close quote, and then I want to put the initial. Okay, so it leaves me with the format that I needed it to be in for QuickBooks to understand what kind of data I'm importing. So I want to copy this down. It fills in all the cells here. Copy, paste special, values, okay. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and save this. It's always good to save along the way. So now that I have it in the QB format, I want to go back to my customer import and I want to do a cross-reference. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a column here, and I'm going to do a Vlookup. So I have the cell, I hit my little FX, hit the Vlookup. So the lookup value, so what am I cross-referencing against? Cross-referencing against column H. The table array, right? So again, I come to my sales rep field. I'm starting with what I'm cross-referencing to, right? This is the field, these two fields. Column H is going to reference to this column here, column A, in this sheet. Now when I select it, I want to select all the cells all the way over to column D. Okay, now notice when I do this, if you see up here in the top right, I don't want to go too far over, but in the right there, notice how it says 4C, right? That means I've highlighted 4 cells. If I go 5 cells, 6 cells, 7 cells, that's kind of a little quick key so that if you're, highlighting 13 cells in a row, you don't have to go back and count them. So I'm returning to cell 4, right? So what column, when it's saying what column are you returning, I'm returning column 4 from this sheet. You have to be careful here. See, as soon as you click on something, it'll change or add additional information in here. Then of course the last range here is going to be 0. So what does it return? It returns the sales rep information as we had it, right, in the QB format, and then I can copy this down. Now I copy this column, paste special, paste values. Then I can delete, excuse me, this sales rep and put the sales rep field in here. Now in this scenario, I'm going to be showing how to import it using an IIF file. So of course, the best way to use it importing using an IIF file is to open up an IIF file with sample data. That's the best way to go about doing it. So I'm going to go into our IIF file that we created when we exported our customer list earlier. So I'm going to go File and Open and navigate to my file here. I need to say not all Excel files, but all files, so I can get to my customer list. Okay. Now when I have my customer list pulled up here, I'm just going to say Finish. And it gives me my customer list in IIF file format here. So again, I'm going to get rid of, this time I'm actually going to get rid of these top rows. Okay. And before I continue forward, I'm going to save it as, in the same folder, I'm going to save it as scenario 2 .iif. You have to have the IIF and you have to have it in a text tab delimited format. So I say save. It's always going to give you this warning. Are you sure you want to keep using this format? Just say yes. Okay, so I'm going to fill in this IIF format here. So one of the best ways that I like doing this is I like to arrange my panes so that I have them both kind of pulled up here. Actually, with all this extra stuff, well, let me go ahead and get rid of some of that extra stuff there and get rid of some of this extra stuff up here. There we go. Okay, so I have up top here, here's my IIF file that I'm going to paste information over for. Down below here, this is where I have all of the information that we just cleaned up. Okay, so basically the easiest thing to do is just to start filling in columns. So I have my name, so I have my customer name here. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste there. Now this field here, you can see there's consistency. So all I do is I just double click to copy it down. It's just telling QuickBooks all of these are customers. The reference and timestamp, same thing. I just copy it down, okay, because it fills in the numbers for me here. The bill to address, line 1. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I fill in, right, bill to line 1 is the first name, last name. Now I can also at the same time go ahead and fill in the ship to address line 1, and if I wanted to, right, I can come over and fill in the company name as well. Okay, but for now I'm going to delete those company names because I'm not going to put them in there yet. Okay, so I have bill to line 1, then I have bill to line 2. So let's go on over here. So address line, I know it says 1, but it's really line 2. Let me make sure I highlighted everything. So copy, paste, address line 3. I'm sorry, before I do that, since it's still copied, I'm going to put in the ship to address at the same time. Then I'm going to take 3, copy, paste it into ship to 3. Now, of course, if you had different ship to addresses, you want to paste that separately or paste it differently. And then I have my bill to 4, and ship to 4. Okay. All right. Now moving across here, you want to make sure that any of the additional cells, right, you don't have any data. So the phone number, well, phone number we do have in here, so let me copy the phone number in. We didn't have phone number 2, so you want to make sure that that cell's blank. Fax number we didn't have, so you want to make sure that that cell's blank. We didn't have email address, right? Okay, so we want to make sure that cell's blank, right? Because that has the sample data in here, so I want to get rid of it. Now remember the note field, that was the account number field, so we want to copy our customer number across. Okay, we do have contact 1 and contact 2 in here if we're going to use them. Customer type we don't have. We do have terms. I'm just going to take out sales tax information since we don't have it. We don't have credit limit, resell. We do have sales rep. So I'm going to copy that sales rep. Again, I'm just using Control V, Control C, Control V. The tax items, we don't have anything, so we're going to take those out. We do have first name and last name, so I'll copy that. Oops, I copied it in the wrong column. Let me copy first name there and last name into the last name. Okay, we didn't have any custom field information on our Excel spreadsheet here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that, move over. We didn't have any job information, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all that. And hidden's not there. We did not have any price levels, but notice they all say hidden, they all say this del count, so you do want to copy those down, right? So it's important, the fields that you see some consistency in, like that, right, kind of like similar to the customer name, you do want to copy those down here. Okay, so now I can go ahead and save this. Every time you save an IIF file, it's going to tell you this warning. Do you want to keep it in this format? You just say yes. Then I'm going to go ahead and import it into QuickBooks. Now when you import it into QuickBooks, you cannot have the IIF file open, so I have to close out of it. When I close out of it, it says, do you want to save your changes? I just saved it, so I'm going to say don't save, okay, because there's all these pop-ups and warnings and all this stuff, and it always tries to get it out of the IIF format. So now that we're in QuickBooks here, I can go into File and Utilities and import my IIF file. And I'm going to navigate to my extra docs here, and I have my scenario 2 that we just created. Okay, good. It's good to use this date modified field. If you don't have that date modified field showing, it's really good to add it because I can tell that I just modified it right at 125, so it tells me that I'm importing the right information. So I just click on this and select open. Now you can double click on it, but we've had some issues with some of the later versions, 14, 15, 16, where if you double click, it'll give you an error. So I say click on it and select open. So it's going to go through. It says my data has been imported. I didn't have any errors, thankfully, and the information's in here. So if I look at Angela Brown, I have both my Angela Browns, right? Because I had added that account number. And if I look at her details here, right, the main phone number, the bill to address looks pretty good, except for I didn't do the proper to clean up the city there. But all the information looks pretty good. The phone number's in there, so everything looks great.